Welcome to my YouTube channel. Hit the like button, share your thoughts, subscribe and tap the bell icon. The rain pounded against the windows, loud and unforgiving. Inside the cafe, the warmth clung to the air, a stark contrast to the chill outside. But there was no comfort in the room. Not for her. The woman stood at the entrance, eyes locked on the table near the window. The one with the reserved sign on it. Her coat was thin, too thin for the weather. The sleeves barely reached her wrists, and the fabric had started to fray at the edges. Her shoes were soaked from the downpour, the water dripping onto the polished marble floor. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. The hostess, a young woman in a tight black dress and heels, looked up from the front desk and caught the woman's gaze. She paused, unsure, then glanced toward the back of the cafe where the manager usually stood. He was there, just as always, inspecting the room with a critical eye. Without hesitation, the hostess gave a subtle shake of her head, warning the woman without saying a word. Not here. Not at this table. The woman's eyes didn't shift. She stayed still, staring at the table as though it held the answers to something long buried. The silence between them stretched, thickening the air. The hostess cleared her throat but said nothing. She could feel the tension growing. The manager, noticing the moment, pushed himself away from the counter and began walking toward her. His footsteps were quick, deliberate, each one echoing in the otherwise silent room. His polished shoes clicked sharply on the marble, a sound that seemed to grow louder as he drew closer. His eyes were cold, assessing. No patience in them. No compassion. Just business. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low, but with a sharp edge. "You can't sit there." The woman didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Her eyes remained locked on the table by the window, the one with the sign. The one she couldn't touch. "I'm sorry, but that table is reserved," he continued, his tone thin with annoyance. She still didn't respond, just stood there, a shadow in the corner of the cafe. Her gaze never left the table. The manager huffed, impatient now. He looked to the hostess, who was pretending not to notice, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I said you can't sit there," the manager repeated, his voice a little sharper this time. The woman's lips parted slightly, almost as if she was about to say something. But the words didn't come. Instead, she took a small step forward, still not looking at him. "I didn't say I would," she replied softly. Her voice was almost too calm, too controlled. It didn't seem to match the tension in the room. The manager's eyebrows furrowed. "Then why are you standing there?" "I like the view," she answered, her voice soft, but with something in it that made him pause. There was a weight behind her words, a quiet confidence that didn't fit with the rest of her appearance. He looked her over quickly. Her coat. Her shoes. She didn't look like someone who would belong in a cafe like this. Not at a table with the best view of the city. Not at a table meant for the regulars. Not at his table. The smile he forced didn't reach his eyes. "People like you don't eat here," he said. A beat of silence passed between them. Then she spoke again, this time just a whisper. "Used to," she said. The words hit him harder than he expected. He opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. His eyes flicked to the hostess, who was now nervously eyeing the floor, and then back to the woman standing in front of him. The woman stood still, her gaze now shifting ever so slightly toward the reserved sign on the table. She looked at it, but her expression remained unreadable. The manager, still trying to regain control of the situation, waved a hand toward the hostess. "Give her a takeout menu, or something. She'll be gone in a minute." He turned his back to walk away, dismissing her as if she was nothing. But the woman didn't budge. The tension in the air thickened as she stepped forward, moving past the table and the bar. She didn't look at anyone. Didn't even glance in the direction of the waiter who watched her, unsure whether to intervene. There was something about her presence that made everyone hold their breath. The room felt smaller. The chatter around the bar died down. She walked calmly toward the hallway at the back of the café, a door marked "Private" at the far end. The hostess's mouth dropped open as she watched the woman pass, and then she looked at the manager, wide-eyed. "She can't go back there," the hostess whispered, but the manager was already in motion, following her. He caught up just as she reached the door. He was angry now, his steps quick and sharp as he crossed the room. He shoved the door open just as the woman stepped inside. "You can't be back here," he said, his voice loud now, carrying a weight of authority that no one could ignore. He stood in the doorway, blocking the space, trying to regain control. But the woman didn't respond. She didn't even acknowledge him. Instead, she walked toward a desk at the far end of the room. It was small but neat, with dark wood and a leather chair behind it. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with thick binders and old photographs. There was a single framed picture on the wall. It looked like it had been taken years ago, and the people in it were unfamiliar. The woman didn't hesitate. She didn't look around. She simply sat down in the leather chair, as though she had every right to be there. As though this had always been her seat. She didn't even glance at the manager. For a moment, he stood frozen in the doorway, his mind struggling to catch up. He stepped inside, his face flushed with anger. He didn't care who she was, what she thought she was doing. She didn't belong here. And yet, there she was, sitting behind the desk. His desk. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice rising. The woman turned her head slowly, locking eyes with him for the first time since they'd met. Her gaze was calm, steady, but there was something dangerous in it. Something sharp. "I signed the papers last night," she said. He blinked. "What papers?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a file from the desk drawer and slid it toward him. The top page was visible, and his name was printed on it, along with the name of the café. His eyes narrowed. He took a step closer and reached for it, but she stopped him. "You still don't remember me?" she asked. He shook his head, not understanding what was happening. What she was talking about. "I remember you," she continued, her voice still quiet, but there was a harshness to it now. "I remember every word you said to me that night. You told me I didn't belong. You laughed at me. Told me I was too," she trailed off for a moment, but he didn't interrupt. "Too what?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "Too ordinary," she said. "Too low." She paused. "You didn't think I could afford a napkin, did you?" The manager's face shifted. He didn't speak. Couldn't speak. His throat felt tight. His mouth dry. "Let me remind you," she said, leaning forward slightly, "what I did after you laughed at me. After you told me I would never work here." She leaned back in the chair, a cold smile forming at the corners of her lips. "I bought this place. With cash." His hand froze over the file, and his heart skipped a beat. She didn't look away. He couldn't look away from her eyes. And then she said the words that chilled him to the bone. "You still don't remember me, do you?" His hand shook. He opened his mouth but nothing came out. Her smile was faint. But it was there. Without another word, she stood up from the chair. The file on the desk remained untouched. He didn't move, still standing frozen in the doorway, as she walked out of the office, past him, leaving him alone with the file. She didn't look back. But he did. The file remained. The second page had yet to be seen. And on that second page, everything changed. The manager's hands were trembling. He stood frozen in the doorway of the small office, staring at the desk in front of him. His breath came in shallow bursts, as if he'd just run a marathon. The door was still open behind him, and the cool air from the hallway rushed in, biting at his skin. But he didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes were locked on the folder on the desk. The woman, no, she, had left. Without a word. Without even a glance back. But the silence in the room now was louder than any words she might have said. His heart pounded against his chest, heavy and hard. It felt as though something crucial had slipped through his fingers, something irreplaceable, and now he couldn't figure out what he'd lost. His gaze dropped to the file. The top page had his name on it, along with the name of the café. His fingers twitched, but he still didn't reach for it. He felt the weight of it without touching it. As though the file itself was mocking him, waiting to reveal something he wasn't ready to face. The room felt smaller now. The walls seemed to close in around him, and he could feel the pressure building in his chest. His palms were sweaty, slick against his suit. He knew he had to look at it. He had no choice. But something about that second page. It haunted him. He wasn't ready. Finally, he reached for it. His fingers brushed against the paper. It was cold, and he felt a shiver run through his body. Slowly, he flipped it over. His breath caught in his throat. There, on the second page, was the truth he hadn't expected. The signature at the bottom of the page was familiar. The pen strokes were too neat, too perfect. It wasn't just anyone's handwriting. It was hers. The woman, she, hadn't just bought the café. She had bought him. The second page wasn't a contract. It wasn't just some paperwork. It was a transfer of ownership, but not just of the building, not just the café. No. It was a contract for his position. His job. His authority. And he hadn't known. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. He was shaking now, his breath ragged as he skimmed the rest of the page. The legalese didn't matter. What mattered was that she'd walked in, calmly, without hesitation, and taken what was hers. And he had no idea. She had already been here. He hadn't seen her before, but she had already been watching. Every single move he'd made. Every harsh word. Every time he'd dismissed someone like her. Every time he'd thought he could get away with his little power trip. She'd seen it all. She'd been waiting. The papers in his hands trembled as he turned them over, one after another. There it was. The confirmation of everything he hadn't wanted to see. She had been planning this for weeks. No. Months. Maybe longer. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this way. This exposed, this vulnerable. The realization that someone had been playing him from the shadows made his stomach churn. He leaned against the desk, clutching the file tightly. The silence in the room was suffocating, pressing down on him with an unbearable weight. The manager swallowed hard. He had to process this. He had to figure out what to do next. But the question lingered, unanswered. Why? He couldn't understand. What had he done to deserve this? Across the street from the café, she sat in her car, parked under the dim light of a street lamp. She had a perfect view of the front door. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the dark clouds still lingered, heavy in the sky. She watched as the café's lights flickered in the window, casting shadows over the empty street. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced at the screen. It was a text message. She didn't need to read it. She knew who it was from. She had been expecting it. The message confirmed what she already knew. The manager was still inside. He hadn't left yet. He was still trying to process everything. She smiled softly. It was going to take him some time to come to terms with it. She'd expected that. He wasn't the type to handle being played so thoroughly. But she had no doubt he would come around. He would have to. There was no other choice. Her phone buzzed again. She glanced at it. Another message. This time, the text was brief. Just one sentence. Are you sure? Her smile faded. She typed quickly. I'm sure. She stared at the screen for a long moment before tossing the phone onto the passenger seat. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as she took a deep breath. It was done. There was no going back now. The game was over. But the truth had just begun. Inside the cafe, the manager finally pulled himself together enough to stand. He didn't know how much time had passed since the woman, she, had left. Minutes? Hours? He had no idea. But he couldn't stay in this office any longer. He couldn't keep thinking about the file, the contract, the signature that had burned itself into his mind. He had to confront her. It wasn't just about the ownership. No. It was about the humiliation. She had outplayed him. He had been the one in control. Or so he thought. Now, everything had changed. He marched out of the office, past the dining area, through the kitchen, and into the front lobby. The hostess looked at him, her face a mix of confusion and uncertainty. He didn't say anything to her. He didn't need to. He had to find her. He had to demand answers. The cafe was nearly empty now. Only a few patrons lingered, none of them noticing the tension in the air. The manager stood at the front of the cafe, staring out the glass doors. She wasn't there. She was gone. Outside, the woman stood under the overhang of a nearby building, watching as the manager stormed through the cafe. She didn't move. She didn't flinch. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. He had to find out on his own. He would eventually. He had no choice. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. Inside, there was a letter. The contents were simple, concise. A reminder. A promise. A warning. It wasn't just the cafe. It was everything. She slipped the envelope back into her bag and turned away. She had no time to waste. There were other things to do. The past had a way of catching up with you, no matter how hard you tried to run. But for now, she had won. She had taken back what was hers. As the night stretched on, the manager stood in the middle of the cafe, his mind racing. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing for certain. The woman was right. She would be back. And when she came, he would have no choice but to face the truth. The rain had stopped, but the thick clouds still clung to the sky, refusing to let go. The manager stood at the window of the cafe, staring into the gray street outside. He hadn't moved in what felt like hours. His hands were stuffed in his pockets, his mind swirling with the unanswered questions that had been gnawing at him since she left. What had happened? How had she done it? She didn't look like the kind of person who would have the means, the resources, or the connections. She was too ordinary. Too quiet. She didn't stand out. And yet, she had outsmarted him. He had spent the last few hours poring over every detail of the contract. He had dug through his files, trying to find some clue, some hint that this was a mistake. But nothing made sense. There was no mistake. The woman had bought the cafe. And with it, she had bought him. It was so simple, so effortless. He hadn't even realized what was happening. She had been right under his nose the whole time, watching, planning. It was almost like she had been waiting for this moment to strike, and when she did, it was with such precision that it left him breathless. His phone buzzed in his pocket, snapping him out of his daze. He pulled it out, and the message was from the same number as before. Do you know who she really is? His heart skipped a beat. It was the second message. The second warning. He had received one like it earlier in the day, but he had dismissed it. Now, he wasn't so sure. He typed a quick response, his fingers shaking as he pressed the keys. "Who is she?" The phone buzzed again almost immediately. "She's not who you think she is. But you'll find out soon enough." The message made his blood run cold. It felt cryptic, dangerous, and for the first time, he began to feel like he was a pawn in someone else's game. He had to find out more. Meanwhile, the woman, she, was back at her apartment, staring at the pile of paperwork on the kitchen table. It wasn't just the cafe that had been transferred to her name. There were other things, too. Things she didn't want to deal with, things she had worked hard to keep buried. Her fingers drummed on the table, her thoughts racing. She had planned this for months. Every detail. Every move. She knew exactly what she was doing. And yet, there was something gnawing at her now, something that unsettled her. The manager. She had been watching him for weeks before she made her move. She had done her research. She had learned everything about him, his arrogance, his tendency to belittle anyone who didn't fit his idea of success. She knew that his ego was his greatest weakness, and she had exploited it. But now, she wasn't so sure anymore. She had expected him to put up a fight, to resist. But he hadn't. He had been too focused on his own little world, too consumed with his idea of control. But now that she had everything, what came next? What would she do with it? She glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. There was a knock at the door. The manager hadn't planned to confront her tonight, but something inside him told him it was the right moment. He had to know who she was. He had to understand why she had done this, why she had played him for a fool. He left the cafe without telling anyone where he was going, without a word to the staff. His mind was consumed by her calm demeanor, her quiet power. As he arrived at her apartment building, he stood at the front door for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no idea what to expect. Was she really who she said she was? Did she really have the power to destroy him? He rang the buzzer. The door opened almost immediately. She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. She was wearing a black hoodie, her hair pulled back into a messy ponytail. She looked nothing like the woman he had seen in the cafe earlier, nothing like the woman who had taken control of his life. "Can I help you?" she asked coolly, as if they were meeting for the first time. His mouth went dry. He had rehearsed this moment over and over in his mind, but now that he was standing here, he wasn't sure what to say. "I need answers," he said, his voice tight. She raised an eyebrow. "Answers?" She leaned against the doorframe, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "I don't owe you anything." He took a step closer, his voice growing more urgent. "I don't know what's going on. You've taken everything from me. I want to know why." She sighed, stepping aside to let him in. "Come in," she said, her voice calm but commanding. "We can talk. But I warn you, it won't be what you expect." Inside the apartment, it was quiet. The soft hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. She gestured for him to sit at the small table, but he remained standing, his hands clenched at his sides. She sat down across from him, her posture relaxed, but there was a hardness in her eyes that unsettled him. "I don't understand," he said, his voice cracking with frustration. "Why did you do this? Why the cafe? Why me?" She looked at him for a long moment, her gaze piercing, before she spoke. "You really don't get it, do you?" Her voice was softer now, almost gentle, but it was laced with an emotion he couldn't place. "You think this is just about the cafe, about your little power trip, don't you? But it's not." He frowned, confused. "Then what is it about?" "It's about what you did," she said quietly, her fingers tapping against the table. "What you've been doing to people for years. The words hit him like a slap. He opened his mouth to protest, but she cut him off. Every person you've humiliated, every person you've made feel small, every person you've laughed at. They've all been waiting for this moment. They've been waiting for someone to take you down. His heart skipped a beat. You've been planning this? She nodded slowly. You were always so sure of yourself, so arrogant. But you were just a puppet, too. A puppet in a game you didn't understand. I'm not the only one who's been pulling the strings. He recoiled, his mind reeling. I don't understand. Who else is involved? She smiled faintly. You'll find out soon enough. It's not just about me anymore. It's about everything you've done to others. And now, it's time for you to face the consequences. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the distant hum of the refrigerator. The manager's mind raced as he tried to process everything she had said. Who else was involved? What game was she talking about? And then it hit him, the realization that sent a chill down his spine. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. This was something much bigger. And he was caught right in the middle of it. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I need to know who's behind this, he demanded. I need to know the truth. She didn't stand up. She just watched him, her eyes unreadable. The truth? She asked softly. You won't be able to handle it. But he was past the point of turning back. He had to know. I can handle it, he said firmly. Her smile faded, replaced with a look of cold calculation. We'll see. She stood, moving past him toward the door. She opened it, but before she left, she turned to face him one last time. You've made your choice, she said quietly. Now, you have to live with it. And with that, she was gone. The door clicked shut behind her, and the manager stood there, frozen in place. He was alone. But the game had only just begun. The night stretched on, each passing moment dragging him deeper into uncertainty. The manager stood in the middle of the empty apartment, still reeling from the woman's cryptic words. Her final look, so cold, so knowing, lingered in his mind like a heavy fog that refused to lift. The silence in the apartment was suffocating. He stood at the threshold of a life he didn't recognize anymore. The comfortable routine of his café, his career, his control, had all been ripped away in an instant. And now, all that was left was the gnawing feeling of something much bigger than him, something beyond his understanding. He had asked for the truth. But now, the weight of that truth seemed unbearable. For the first time in years, he didn't know what came next. He left her apartment without looking back. There was nothing left for him there, no answers, no relief. He had to go somewhere, anywhere, to clear his head. He needed to understand. He needed to make sense of the chaos that had engulfed him. The café was still open, and the night shift was in full swing. But as he walked through the front door, he didn't feel the rush of control that had once comforted him. The familiar sounds of the espresso machine, the chatter of patrons, the clink of glasses, it all felt foreign now. He moved through the café like a ghost, unnoticed by everyone around him. No one knew what had just happened. No one knew that everything had changed. He went straight to his office. His heart was racing, but his mind was still too clouded to think clearly. The file was still there, sitting on the desk, mocking him. The contract. The ownership. The truth he hadn't wanted to face. The sound of the door opening made him freeze. The hostess walked in, her face pale. She paused when she saw him standing by the desk, staring at the papers. Are you all right? She asked softly. He didn't answer at first. Instead, he turned toward her, his eyes wide with disbelief. How long have you been working here? He asked suddenly. The question was random, but it felt important. The hostess hesitated, glancing down at the floor before answering. About 2 years. He nodded slowly, his thoughts racing. You've seen me here every day, haven't you? You've watched me treat people the way I have. The way I always treated everyone. He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. What kind of person does that make me? She stepped closer, her eyes filled with something he couldn't quite place, sympathy? Pity? You were always in control. But that doesn't mean you were right. She paused, as if considering her next words carefully. You've hurt a lot of people, but you've never had to face the consequences until now. His heart sank. And now I have to face them? She nodded silently, her gaze never leaving his. The next few hours passed in a blur. The manager couldn't focus on anything. His mind was consumed with thoughts of the woman, the one who had destroyed his life with nothing more than a quiet, calculated move. He had to know why. Why her? Why now? By the time he left the cafe, the sun had already started to rise, casting a dim light over the city. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He had done nothing but wander, lost in his own thoughts. He needed to find her. To confront her one last time. To get the answers he so desperately craved. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another message. Meet me at the old warehouse. You'll find your answers there. The address was familiar. He knew the place. It had been abandoned for years, a relic of the city's past. But why there? What did she want with him now? His hands shook as he typed a response. I'm coming. The warehouse was dark, cold, and eerily silent as he approached. The tall metal doors were ajar, creaking as the wind pushed through the gaps. He stepped inside cautiously, his breath visible in the frigid air. The place smelled of dust and decay, a forgotten relic from another time. Shadows clung to the corners, and the only sound was the echo of his footsteps as he walked deeper into the cavernous space. And then he saw her. She was standing near the back, under a single hanging light. Her silhouette was unmistakable. She didn't turn when she heard him approach. She didn't acknowledge his presence at all. You wanted answers? Her voice was soft, but it carried across the space like a whisper. Well, here they are. He took a few tentative steps closer, his heart pounding in his chest. Why here? He asked. His voice raspy. Why this? What does any of this have to do with me? She turned to face him then, her eyes cold and unyielding. Everything you've done, everything you've built, was on the backs of people like me. People you didn't care about. People you used and discarded without a second thought. She paused, her gaze narrowing. But now, you'll see the truth. You'll see who you really are. He took a step back. What do you mean? What truth? She stepped forward, her voice rising with quiet intensity. You think you've been playing the game. But you've been a pawn all along. His breath hitched in his chest. A pawn? Who the hell are you to talk to me like that? Who am I? She smiled faintly, her expression hardening. I'm the one you never noticed. The one you never cared to know. The one you made into an invisible servant in your little world. Her eyes pierced his, full of fire. I'm the woman you humiliated in front of everyone at the cafe. But more than that, I'm the one who's going to bring you down. Not for me, no. For all of them. For every person you've ever wronged. He stared at her, stunned. What are you talking about? Who else is involved? Who's behind all of this? She took a deep breath, her gaze never leaving his. I'm the last person you'll ever need to face. You don't need to know who else is behind this. What matters is that it's over for you. You'll never be in control again. She stepped closer, her voice low and final. You've lost. And now you'll see what it feels like to be powerless. To be nothing. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came. His throat tightened, and for the first time in years, he felt small, truly small. Helpless. Her words had pierced his armor, and there was no denying it anymore. She was right. He left the warehouse without saying another word. He didn't need to. The truth had been laid bare for him. And there was no going back. The café was no longer his. His position, his power, his sense of control, it was all gone. And in its place was a heavy, suffocating emptiness that he had never known before. It was over. As he walked through the quiet streets, the first light of morning breaking over the horizon, he realized something. The woman had taken everything from him, but in doing so, she had given him something more valuable. She had given him the truth. The real truth. The kind that couldn't be ignored or swept under the rug. And now, he would have to live with it. The lesson was simple but brutal: you can't keep taking without losing something in return. The game was over. But for him, the hardest part was just beginning.